Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials, named Jairus, came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please, come lay your hands on her, that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed upon him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had, yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to Jesus, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid. Just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they ridiculed him. Then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him and entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that, they were utterly astounded. He gave strict orders that no one should know this and said that she should be given something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, this Sunday is 13th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and parts of that gospel is a little difficult for me to get through, given our set of circumstances this past week, which I'm sure you're all aware of, or most of you should be aware by now. If you don't, you can ask me later. But nonetheless, in this section of the Gospel of Mark, it's chapters 4 through 6 is this major section. Jesus is demonstrating authority over nature, demons, disease, and death. We can recall from that first reading, wisdom, that God did not make death, but it was by the envy of the devil that death entered the world. Death is a result of the devil's envy. He is envious of us for what we have in God, in eternal life that awaits us. But previous to this Gospel of Mark, this is chapter 5, verses 21 through 43, Jesus did what last week? He calmed the storm at sea. Before that, he liberated a man who was tormented by legion or a legion of demons. In today's text, we see two other things going on here. Jesus cures this woman with 12 years of hemorrhaging just before raising a dead girl back to life. And so this would be the disease and death parts of Jesus demonstrating authority over nature, demons, disease, and death. So that's that major thesis. Jesus' authority over nature, demons, disease, and death, and how we are able to participate in that same victory. So what's being shown there is Jesus' ultimate triumph over death, specifically in this gospel passage, and how we receive God's own life into ours through faith by trust in God. And this is why the faith, your personal faith, not faith in reference to the entire religion, we call that the fides quae in Latin. Fides qua is your faith, the faith of the individual. So your personal faith and trust in God. This is so important for us to simply live every day. So we can recall that in the storm at sea, all these references are about death. So in the storm at sea, the disciples were near death because the boat was filling with water in the high winds and the rough seas. We can recall that in the legion, the expulsion of the legion, the demoniac was a living death. If you're familiar with that gospel passage, he was always bruising himself and running around the dead area, the cemetery area where people were buried, and just crying out all day long. Just a picture of complete human despair. But that demoniac was a living death being possessed by approximately 5,000 demons. So that's what a legion is when you run into legion there. That is about 5,000. So the woman with hemorrhages then, she was hemorrhaging for 12 years. That is a life that is literally draining away. As for the Jewish people, they understood life to be in the blood. And so if you're losing blood, you're losing life. And so for 12 years, this woman is losing her life slowly. She's bleeding away. So in each case, the way to triumph over death and experience the saving power of Jesus Christ and work miracles in our own lives is by faith in Jesus as Lord for everything that causes fear and distress in human life. We are not going to be able to overcome those typical fears or any fears or all fears and distress in human life without faith. This is why it's, again, so important for us to have this faith in Jesus and who he is. And so we have to reject fear and yield to faith. We have to yield to faith as if we are surrendering to faith, giving up to faith. Not giving up because we're experiencing suffering, but we're yielding to this faith in Jesus Christ. It's practically and realistically manifested as a deep and personal trust in God. And so even when things don't turn out the way we had prayed for, okay, we are still remaining faithful. We're still remaining faithful to God who is faithful. And we have to always comprehend that God's will is not always ours. So we can bring God's great power into our lives, even in a sense, as we see in this gospel, against Jesus' will. Okay, by faith and trust in him, as this woman shows with the hemorrhages. But Jesus is not satisfied with just healing us. He wants a personal relationship too, which is why he stops and looks around to find out who touched me. So this woman's faith, this is an incredible faith by both of these people in this gospel, touching clothes for instantaneous cure or healing. Okay, so the cure is usually instantaneous. Healing usually takes some time, but in this case, the Gospel of Mark seems to switch between the two. It goes from cure to healing to cure. So it's interesting. We're not sure exactly which one it is. Which one it is. It seems to be instantaneous. But the point here is that this woman's faith, that puts her in personal contact with Jesus and his healing power. Okay, this is what makes things work for us as Christians, as faithful believers. Things work because we believe. We believe in Jesus, who is the Lord. Jesus, he looked around so his gaze could meet hers. so that he's able to meet her for who she is. And that's what Jesus wants from each one of us. He just doesn't want a bunch of brainless worshipers, ritual observers. He is infinite, and he can have a very personal relationship with each and every one of us because he's God and he's infinite. We can't have relationships with every single person in the world, past, present, and future, because we're not infinite. If we're lucky to have relationships with 1,000 people on earth in our lifetime, that's pretty good. Okay, but we probably have more relationships with more people than we realize. Right? But God, Jesus, the second person, most holy Trinity, he wants to have a personal relationship with each and every one of us, and he can. And so faith is critical and all significant to believe that God is as amazing and all-powerful as Jesus reveals him to be. Faith is a prerequisite for experiencing any of God's life into ours at all. And for this woman, her faith both heals her body and saves her soul. And if we can't get the first one, we can at least hope for the last one, the salvation of our souls. So while the crowds of people are bumping up against Jesus as they are pressing in on him, this woman's touch is efficacious enough to heal and save. But all those other people that are bumping up against Jesus in the crowd, what's happening to them? Apparently nothing. So faith is what makes the difference, bringing her into a living contact with the Lord, allowing her to experience a dramatic healing. So how often do we bump up against Jesus, figuratively speaking, in, say, receiving him in the Holy Sacrament of the Eucharist, and nothing really happens? Unfortunately, maybe more often than it should. Is our personal encounter with Jesus in the Holy Eucharist just another half-conscious jostle up against him amid all the other preoccupations of the day? Or are we determined to truly touch him personally with that lively trust, faith, belief, and awareness of the grace and power that can flow forth from one single reception of the Holy Eucharist into our lives? This woman, then, has delayed Jesus in arriving at Jairus' house as the messengers show up to tell him his daughter is already dead. Jesus ignores these messengers with that message. He turns to Jairus, who really has to have a lot of faith. And he must be believing that all hope is lost, for sure at this point. But Jesus, he says, do not be afraid. Just have faith. Or literally, do not be afraid, only believe. The situation has changed, though. Earlier, his daughter was sick. Now she's dead. And Jesus is calling Jairus to have a faith so deep to believe that Jesus can conquer death itself. Of course, sleep is Jesus' characteristic way of saying dead, but he realizes also that death is truly only a sleep. For all are to be awakened by the power of Jesus to the resurrection of eternal life. Amen. Jesus, he calls his listeners to recognize. That's us. Jesus is calling his listeners to recognize that death is not the ultimate end of human life, but rather only a temporary phase from which to be awakened in the resurrection. Again, God did not make death, goes all the way back to wisdom. But by the envy of the devil, it entered our world. The devil is envious of us. And he has given death as a last-ditch effort to cause despair and doubt that God is truly who he reveals himself to be. So Jesus, his raising of the dead girl would be a sign that despair and terror at the finality of death are no longer an inevitable part of human life. We have to get out of this thinking that death is the end. This culture is so stuck on it. It is an entire culture of death. It is all about death and cancellation and obsolescence. We are a people of life. And if we have faith and it's a living faith, we don't really care that much about death because it is only a single momentary phase in the whole life cycle. Eternity. Let's get this word, this definition in our hearts and minds too. Eternity. Forever. Life goes on. Forever. Eternal life. Eternal life. It goes on forever. And death is a moment. We're all going to pass through it. And if we are faithful, we will not be so terrorized at the threat of death as most people are who struggle because they don't have a faith in Jesus as Lord. And so Jesus, he puts all these mourners and disbelievers out when he went in to resurrect the little girl. Why? Because unbelief creates a climate that hinders God's mighty works from being accomplished. You heard it before elsewhere in the gospel. Well, he couldn't work any miracles there. Why? Because the people didn't have faith. You see how important faith is for us? It becomes so critical in our day-to-day. And this is what is so needed for us. Unbelief creates a climate that hinders God's mighty works from being accomplished. And I'm not the master of faithfulness. I could use a lot more too. But this is why God gave us the church, he gave us the sacraments, he gave us grace, and he allows us the trials. He allows those trials to test us, so to speak, so that we have those opportunities to practice faith, to make an act of faith in the face of doubt, in the face of suffering and trial. Because that is the only way faith grows, when it's practiced. Well, I guess it can grow other ways if it's a divine infusion. That you'd be very blessed to have one of those, but most of us have to grow by actually growing theological virtue of faith by practicing it. That usually requires some threat of doubt, so to speak. But unbelief creates that climate that hinders God's mighty works from being accomplished. But faith, on the other hand, we can accomplish anything through faith if it's according to God's will. And that is always the caveat. If it's according to God's will. And so it's this simple yet powerful believing. Do not be afraid, just only believe. Actually, what he said, only believe. It's this simple yet powerful believing that transforms our lives. Your attitude, the way we understand faith, the way we understand God. People with more positive attitudes, they accomplish more. People with negative attitudes, they don't necessarily accomplish more. So it's like that positive outlook in that sense. It's a simple yet powerful believing in Jesus Christ as Lord. The woman just touched Jesus' clothes. The synagogue official wanted Jesus to come and lay hands on his daughter. Their faith brings them into living contact with our Lord, and that results in dramatic healing. Faith is the disposition that opens the way for God's mighty works to be accomplished in our lives. And so this is, of course, the thing that we need to keep looking at. Faith, 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 faith. Believing, believing, believing. Living trust in God, a living trust in God. Of course, when we fear, on the other hand, we disable ourselves from trusting in God Almighty. If we give in to fear, we're going to disable our faith. It neutralizes it. That's what fear does. That's why the devil uses that tool all the time. It's like number one tool in his bag. Maybe it's number two, lies that cause fears, lies and fear, because it neutralizes faith. And the devil already knows when we're faithful and we reject fear, he can't win. And he is already envious of us for what is in store for us, for what God has in store for us, this eternity of beautiful life. Fear is only the devil suggesting that we are powerless when we are not. In the end, essentially, the entire Christian life is all about yielding to the Holy Spirit. Believing in God and rejecting fear enables us to experience and live God's own life within ours. So Jesus, again, he's calling us to faith, and all of life can make sense if only we believe.